Good afternoon, everyone. It's very nice to have this unique chance to participate the GISRUK 2020. I'm Yezi from University of Leeds, and my topic today is estimating small area demand of urban tourists for groceries. The case of London, it may be a little bit different from what's on the program, but basically it's just the extended research of what's on the program. So first is an overview of the study. The estimation of small area retail demand has traditionally been residence-based, but recent work also looks into some non-residential demand. For example, the workplace, school and university students, and the tourists as coastal resorts. However, the demand from tourists in urban destinations such as London, although recognized as significant contributor to the local economy, the estimation at the small area level is understudied. A major reason is the deficiency of the fine-scale population statistics regarding tourists and their expenditure. Okay, then I will go on. So I just talk about the deficiency of fine-scale tourist population and their expenditures. So in this research, we intend to collate the conventional statistic and the survey data sets with the crowdsourcing big data sources. And we take the grocery shopping as our specific example to estimate the small area demand of different tourist groups at their LSOA level. And then we incorporate them into a final tourist grocery demand layer for London. Aligning with the official survey, we identified mainly 4 tourist groups. The first one is the visitors using the Airbnb, and the next one is the free guests who spend their nights with relatives and friends who are at their own home in London. And the third one is the typical hotel and other serviced accommodation travelers. And the last one is the day trip visitors who don't use any overnight accommodation in London. All of these 4 main tourist groups have certain degree of grocery shopping demand. For the former 2 ones, since they have the facility to cook for themselves, so they may have the demand to do some serious grocery shopping and cook for themselves. But for the latter 2 ones, they won't cook, but they still might grab something during their trips in the daytime. This table details the data sources that we used in each of the visitor types of this study. We combined LDNA dataset, OpenStreetMap dataset, and the geotargeted Twitter together with other official statistics and survey datasets. And from now on, I will talk through each of the 4 tourist groups. For each of them, I will first introduce how we generate the tourist distribution. And then I will justify how we determine the grocery shopping expenditure rate of each tourist type. So the first one is Airbnb guest. The left figure is the Airbnb capacity across London, according to our data set. But instead of use the capacity, we use the utilization of Airbnb properties in a 1-year span to create the practical guest distribution over London. Is what we see on the right figure. The Airbnb reports that £10 is spent on groceries by their international guests in the UK. Since we can't find any specific data about London, so we will use the £10 as the grocery as the Airbnb guest grocery spending rate. According to this map, we can find that the Airbnb guest demand distributed not solely associated with the core central London hotspots, but widely spread in the inner London and also some parts of the outer London. The second tourist group is the hotel and the service accommodation travelers. We distributed the total 415,000 bed space, which is from the accommodation stock audits in London. And we allocate all this bed space to all the service accommodation establishments, which we obtained from the Order Survey POI and OpenStreetMap. We also considered the average bed occupancy rate in London. Since we can't find any useful data about their grocery shopping, but we think that their grocery shopping behaviors might be similar to the non-residential workplace grocery shopping demand. So we follow the recommendation from the retail partner for the workplace demand that use £5 as the per guest per week spending on grocery. And then we got the result map as the right one. The third type is the free guests who spend the night with the relatives, friends, or their own home in London. Two survey data are used here. The first one is the International Passenger Survey, and the second one is the Great Britain Tourism Survey, which focusing on domestic visitors. We first talk about the inbound tourists. The International Passenger Survey reports the number of inbound free guest visits from each of their main source market. And we assume that these free guests, when they stay in London, they're more likely to stay with the relatives and friends who share the same ethnicity with themselves. Therefore, we make use of the ethnicity distribution in London from the census 2011 and evenly allocate all the free guests from each of the source market to the corresponding ethnic group household in London. And by combining them together, we got a distribution of the inbound tourist free guests as this map. And this slide is about the domestic visitors. They are distributed in a similar but simpler way because for the domestic visitors, they can be any kind of ethnic group. We don't know what specific ethnicity of them. And therefore, we just simply distributed all of them to all the households in London. And so we got a map like this. We combine the inbound tourists and the domestic visitors together. For their grocery spending rate, we just follow the living costs and the food survey, which reports that for an adult in London, that £24 per guest per week were spent on grocery shopping. So we think that the guests may just follow the same spending rate as their hosts. So we coupling this with £24 per person per week to get our results for this kind of tourist group. The last group is the overlooked day trip visitors. Although they don't stay overnight in London, but if you consider their amount, it can be more than twice of the overnight visitors, and nearly 18% of them are London residents. The daytime population survey provides the day trip visitors at the borough level, but since our study wants to conduct on an LSOA level, which means we need to disaggregate them down to the LSOA level. So at this part, we make use of the daytime geotarget Twitter in London. We use the Twitter data in 1 year span, identified the origin of the users, and only use the domestic UK Twitter users who were presenting in London during this time. According to their distribution proportion of these Twitter users of each LSOA to its borough, we break down the borough level daytime visitors into LSOA level. Also, the related reports of the Great Britain Day Visits Survey reports that a little bit less than £6 per person per day is spent on grocery shopping. So therefore, by multiplying them together, we obtained the day trip visitor demand results as the right figure. So all our 4 tourist groups have been talked. This slide shows a resultant demand layer of adding up the 4 previous results. Altogether, we estimated that 14 million per week grocery demand are generated by tourists in London, and the uplift of this by comparing to the residential demand, we have this map that which shows the uplift of this tourist demand to the original residential demand. We can find that from this map that the LSOA in inland London that have adjacent to major attractions unsurprisingly have substantial uplift, but also there are other unexpected neighborhoods which have limited tourist attraction, but still can benefit different degree from the tourist demand. So that's what how we incorporate all 4 different tourist groups demand into one tourist grocery demand layer in London. And we believe that our research has several practical implications. So I will have a brief discussion at here. So for first, we believe that it can help to understand the tourism food desert in urban destination. The grocery supplies usually located to the local residential demands, which left the gaps to the tourist demand. Therefore, by comparing with the existing grocery floor space, we can identify the mismatched tourist demand. In the red map, we can see that the impoverished areas are those we found that unmet tourist demand existed, that might a new store or new establishment of the food and beverage that might benefit from them. And also in a similar way that we can compare the food and beverage establishment with our demand layer to further identify this issue. And the second potential point is this layer helps to understanding tourist demand, including the volume and the composition of the customers in each individual store catchment. Our research found that in some area of London, tourists may make up something like 20% to 30% of the total store revenues. And also since the Airbnb data and the free guest data and the GeoTwist data, we can identify their country of origin. So this information can help us to understand the tourist makeup and help us to provide additional information for the store operating. And also that it can help us to identify some demographic groups that are more likely to indulge in food tourism and some of the practical tourism management issues. And the third potential point is this tourist layer can be incorporated into an origin retail location modeling, which is mainly based on the residential and the workplace. And we believe that after adding the tourist demand into it, it will enable a more informed evidence, and the model will be increase the robustness of the model, and can help in location planning and the store performance evaluation and other things in the store evaluation in grocery retail sector. So my last slide talks about the limitation, contribution, and the future work of this research. We understand that our limitation mainly from two aspects. The first one is some of the grocery spending rates is based on the assumption, but still we believe that even a cautious spending rate used in our research still indicates that significant uplift of store revenues can be generated from the tourist demand. And the second limitation is that for now we haven't found any existing related studies that can be used to do the validation. But we hope that after our retail location model is built, that the cooperation with a retail partner can use it to help us to validate the accuracy of our result. And also the the contribution of it. Our research is a detailed example of combining traditional statistics and survey data with crowdsourcing big data source. And this methodology can be obviously leveraged to other urban destinations. And when we understand our research questions, that we found that no existed tourist population distribution data set can be found at the small area in London. So we believe that the result of our study also offers a high spatial and temporal granularity estimates of the small area tourist distribution and disaggregate by different visitor type. And our resultant layer shows considerable expenditure, spatial varied uplift patterns of tourist demand. And since our case is the grocery shopping, but if other retail sectors that they know the average expenditure rate of their own, then they can just simply use it to build their own demand layer. And we believe that's some of our contribution. And for the future work, then what we are going to do is to incorporate the tourist demand layer into the traditional retail location model, which consists of residence and workplace demand. And the results gonna be used to evaluate the store performance from the tourist at the store level. We hope we can help to understand that the contribution of each of the different visitor types to the individual store, and consider of different store formats or different brands. And that's all from me. Thank you for your attention. Any question is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very excellent presentation, very clear and perfectly to time. I have asked in the chat if people has any questions or comments. Nobody has typed anything yet. In the moment where some people might generate some questions, I have a number of short questions I'm interested in.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the problems encountered in integrating all of those data sets? Because you have a lot of data.
Yes.
What kind of problems did you encounter in integrating those data sets and preparing them for the analysis that you performed?
I think I spend the most of time to find the best data set used for each of these visitor types, because we for each of them, it can seldom that you have the handy data that direct can be used. So which we need to do is try to find the most appropriate data set and to model it into what we want. For example, for the free guests, we just know the total amount of all these free guests, but we need to find a way to get a LSOA level tourist distribution. So we need to disaggregate them and distribute them according to their ethnic groups, and something like that for each of these tourists. That takes a lot of time, yes, to do that. And also for the GeoTweets, we need to separate the domestic visitors and to understand their distributions. Yeah, a lot of time spent on the data pre-processing, I think. Yeah.
Okay. I have another small question. Slide on data. I noticed there was one area, Hillington.
Yes.
Which had no day trip visitors and it had no daytime GeoTweets.
Yes.
What do you know the reason for that?
I assume that the reason is because of the lack of tourist attractions, and because the daytime visitors usually the usually the leisure visitors that spend 3 hours plus time at their daytime leisure activities. So maybe it's because of the lack of of resources or parks or green spaces, something like that. Yeah.
In the absence of a question from the chat, I have one more question.
Okay.
How do you think this analysis will be affected by the data set for 2020 and when those data sets become available, given what's happened with the lockdown and the various social distancing measures brought about by the pandemic response? How do you feel this analysis will look next year when you use 2020 data?
Yes, I believe that first the Airbnb data set is going to be very different because the utilization of it will be reduced a lot. And also for daytime visitors, but we still can obtain them from the GeoTweets, use the same methods to see how it changed from this year to the next year. Yes, and also the hotel, yeah. But I think the official surveys, they will report the new occupancy of it, but and also the Airbnb, they will update the data site. So it can still be done in the same methodology, and we can do the comparison for each part. Thank you.